afternoon, and welcome back to this week's episode of Since I Was Young, a podcast dedicated to all things Heart of Midlothian. I am flying solo this afternoon, as it may not already be obvious. Both Ewan and John, unfortunately, unavailable today to come along and talk about the first loss of the Scottish Premiership season that we suffered at the hands of Aberdeen on Sunday just past. A big game, obviously, off the back of Celtic and Rangers both labouring to victories. Celtic scoring in the last minute against St Mirren, and Rangers, as I say, labouring to a 2-1 win over Livingston, which had its own controversies in that game also. So it fell to us on Sunday to bounce back and increase the gap once again. However, it was not to be. As I say, the first defeat of the Premiership season followed. So this week I'll just be giving you my thoughts, and we'll be kind of touching on a few bits and pieces. Of course, folks, it's a solo episode this week, so it's slightly different format, slight change of format, sadly, but I'll do my very best to cover all the points that I want to cover. And if you have any thoughts or any response, please do fire them in the comments section down below. Your comments, thoughts, and feedback is massively appreciated. Whilst you're down there, why not subscribe to the YouTube channel? You know, again, your support is massively appreciated, and we enjoy interacting with you all across the social channels, which you can see scrolling along the bottom of the screen as we speak. As I say, I am flying solo this week. There are a lot of bells and whistles to the podcast, so please do not expect the same usual polished output that we usually provide for you, but I'll certainly do my very best to just put my thoughts out. Day of recording, this is Tuesday afternoon, so a few days have passed since the game, and I feel like my views have mellowed somewhat compared to how they were at full time at Pittodrie. But we'll dive in as we go along. We usually kick off a podcast where we speak about the starting 11 that Derek McInnes selects for the games. So that seems as good a place as any to start. Of course, we were without Craig Halkett due to a suspension and Benny Beningame due to injury, as well as you, our midfielder who appears to have hamstrings made out of cheese. Every time he comes close to coming in, he suffers a setback, and he has had yet another setback, our record signing. Is there some concerns there? Is there some frustrations there? John mentioned it a few weeks ago about there being possibly some concerns from his point of view about the outlay that we've spent, how little we've seen of him. I said back then that I was not worried, and I'm still not worried. I think Ayew will come in and make an impact when he is fit and available to do so. However, I think he's just not there yet. He's just not ready to do that as yet. So it is what it is. Will he be worth the wait? We'll certainly wait and see. Obviously, another massive absentee from the starting 11 was that of captain Lawrence Shankland. He helped Scotland reach their first World Cup in 28 years during the international break, and then he picked up a knock on his return to club training. They had to utilise the AstroTurf at the Oriam, which a lot of people have spoken about that particular setup at the Oriam, and not in the most glowing of terms. The outside pitch was supposedly frozen, so rather than delay training, they decided to train on the Astro, and that is where Lawrence Shankland felt something and was not risked for the trip to Pittodrie, which was disappointing but understandable. You don't want to aggravate anything and make it worse, and then could see him out for longer. But I think it's safe to say, and we'll kind of dive into the game, his absence, along with that of Halkett and Benny, was very much felt during the 90 minutes. We did see the return of Frankie Kent, a long-awaited return from his injury layoff that he's had, so it was nice to see him return and be involved, and obviously just come back in and bolster up the numbers again, which I think defensively we maybe need a little bit of that at the moment. So it's a welcome return for Frankie Kent to come back in. He was joined in a back three with Steinvender and Stuart Finlay. He also went off with a little knock during the game, so there could be some defensive issues there, but they were flanked by Milne on the left and McKenty on the right, O'Shea McKenty played right wing back of the back five with Cammy Devlin and Thomas Bernd Magnuson in midfield, with Kizaridis in the number 10 role, and then we had Kabore and Braga as the front two. Now, I felt, and we kind of talk about these games often when we speak about them, and we're reviewing them in the lead up to the game against Aberdeen on the Sunday, with, like I said, the results of the Old Firm from the previous day and the gap closing from Celtic. there was that element of, right, this game is massive. This is a huge 3 points that we have to go to Pittodrie and get. However, I think an element of perspective, an element of context is required, and this is a ground that we've not won at since 2016. That speaks volumes. There have been decent Hearts sides in that time that have failed to win at Pittodrie. It's such a strange fixture. Obviously, we know Aberdeen's record at Tynecastle is just as bad, so it's kind of one of those games that the home side always appears to have an advantage, whether they actually do or they don't. Maybe it's a psychological thing, but yeah, listen, it is what it is. We went to Pittodrie, and yeah, as I say, I can talk about the missing players. That's an element of why I feel like we didn't win the game. But I do feel like as well, over the last few weeks, there has been a little bit of stuttering. Obviously, we beat Celtic at the end of October, and then we had obviously the disappointing draw with St Mirren, following a hammering of Dundee, and then the draw with Dundee United, which left a little bit to be desired in that game as well. So I did feel like a loss wasn't too far away. And as frustrating as it is, Pittodrie is a ground that we don't win at, so it does make sense that that's where we would suffer our first loss of the season. As the game started, it was kind of a stop-start, back and forth sort of battle, both sides trying to sort of put their authority on the game, but neither side really being able to do so. Um, we matched up their system, their back three. I think Derek McInnes possibly did that to try and counter the threat of Jesper Karlsson at Aberdeen. He's been their main man this season, the loanee. He was, however, unavailable due to personal reasons. So, the structural change and the system change was perhaps redundant, and it did change in the second half, which we'll go into. There were some chances right at the start. We had we had a few chances not too far into the game, and it just, I don't know about anybody watching this or listening to this, but to me it just felt like it wasn't going to be our day from it early on. Stuart Finley's chance that he side foots past the post, he was in an offside position. However, if he's onside, he connected with that very well. If that goes in, it's a different day. But sadly, he just moved a little bit too soon and found himself offside. It was a great delivery from Kizarides that found him at the back post. But again, like I say, just timing wasn't quite right. We had Harry Milne hitting the crossbar after a stramash in the box. The ball broke to him and he just sort of stuck his foot through it and came back off the crossbar and went out for a goal kick. All of those chances came prior to the Aberdeen goal. If one of those goes in, as I say, different day. The Aberdeen goal, however, exploited an area that has been exploited one too many times this season, with the right hand side of our defence once again coming under some threat. Paul Vara gets the ball for Aberdeen and sort of plays a looping ball over the top in behind the right back situation, into the path of Keskinen. He's then 1v1 against Frankie Kent, and as much as I like Frankie Kent as a physical, no nonsense defender, when he comes up against pace, he seems to struggle. And I think Keskinen, okay, he gets a little break of the ball because it comes back to him off of Frankie Kent, but Kent's never in control of that 1v1. Keskinen stands him up and just leaves him in his dust and cuts inside and hits a very good finish across Shvolov into the back of the net to give Aberdeen a 1-0 lead, which do I think they deserved? Maybe not in that moment, but you know what? They took a chance and they scored it. It was something that we didn't do all day, unfortunately. And, not to sound like Michael Owen or anything, but if you don't score, you're not going to win. It kind of sums it up in that sense. To be honest, it was frustrating. And, I've seen lots of things sort of said and mentioned following the game, where people have said, oh, we didn't play well enough, we didn't do this, we didn't do that. I disagree. I don't think the performance was bad. I think we've played better than that this season. I don't think there's any doubt of that. But I don't think it's as bad as I've seen us. I think we just had a lot of effort, a lot of endeavour, but it just didn't come to anything in the final third, unfortunately. And that, you need that. You need to have that composure and that confidence. And I think, again, I go back to it, missing Lauren Shanklin from your lineup takes a huge part out of it. He's massive. He's influential in that forward line, and everybody feeds off of him. Even if he's not directly involved, he's always around and he's always doing something. And I think his absence was massively felt in the game against Aberdeen. I don't think we had that experience up front. Obviously, Pierre-Landry Kabori scoring for fun for his country has returned to Hearts in high spirits and looking to kick on, but he's still very much a rough diamond. Braga, a very talented player. However, you can see that connection with Shankland is there, but maybe he doesn't have that with the other forwards at the moment. Kizarides, I felt like in the first half, didn't offer a great deal, aside from his set-piece deliveries. I think he was drifting too central for large parts of the game, and that was, again, due to the system. He was just coming inside too often, and, it was very easy for Aberdeen to crowd that middle part of the sort of defensive line and stop us from really doing anything. So at halftime, 1-0 down, I was annoyed, but apologies. 1-0 down at halftime, I was frustrated, but I felt like if we make the right changes, we can come back into this. We just need the break of the ball. We just need one to fall for us. It'll happen. Um, Second half began. We had made some changes. We shuffled the system around, went to a back four, and you could see there was a bit more, not confidence, but a bit more structure and a bit more kind of threat that we carried, which I think was a big thing as well. But again, the second half kind of followed that same pattern. It was very much we tried to, turn the pressure on, and we tried to get at Aberdeen because they didn't have as many opportunities in the second half as we did. But again, a lack of composure, a lack of confidence was what did us. John speaks about partnerships on the park quite often. We had new partnerships on the park against Aberdeen. We had Devlin and Magnuson in midfield, who haven't really played together all that much. We had a back three that was reintroduced Frankie Kent into it, and the forward line of Kabori and Braga, both talented players, haven't played often enough together. And it was just, there were moments where one of them had the ball and the other one was making a run and they couldn't find each other, or they waited too long, or they didn't wait long enough. It was all a bit pressured. It was all a bit sloppy and just didn't have that sort of free-flowing play that we've seen in the early stages of the season. We had some chances in the second half as it went on. We had Braga, and I think the biggest chance of the day was Braga and their lad Milne, their defender Milne, makes a goal-saving clearance to get it away from him. It was well worked from Kabori. He brings it down well, feeds Braga. The ball just sort of bounces and he hits it, and Milne just gets something on it to get rid of it. Any other day, if he's not there, that's a goal. So yeah, frustrated, annoyed, irritated, all of those things. The other point I wanted to make on the sort of last chance of note was the penalty claim for Mitov coming off his line and flapping at a corner. So he comes out and he takes out, I think it was Kabore, but he goes up for he contests the ball with Frankie Kent. He gets nowhere near it. He simply lands on Kabore and wipes him out. It's momentum. I don't think there's enough there to claim for a penalty. As much as I would have liked one, I think it's one of those, if it was happening at the other end of the pitch, I would have been absolutely raging to see it given. So a game, sadly, we saw, as I say, chances came and went. We just didn't have that final killer instinct, sadly, to get us back into the game. And ultimately, we suffered our first defeat of the Premier League season, cutting the gap between ourselves and Celtic to 4 points. We are currently 4 points ahead. Not 4 points clear. I've said that before, and John will pull me up for that because we're not 4 points clear. We're 4 points ahead. Celtic have a game in hand, which again puts pressure on us to kind of try and do something there. Have I got anything else to talk about from the game? A lot of rushing things, a lot of forcing moves that didn't happen. Just not great. It wasn't the best of performances, but do you know what? It is what it is. We have to bounce back and we have to go again. And Derek McInnes, in his post-match comments, made remarks like we didn't get the ball into the box often enough. I think he's absolutely spot on. When you've got a guy like Kabori who has a physical presence, try and put the ball on him. And every time we found ourselves in a position to get the ball into the area, we didn't do it, or we didn't do it quickly enough, and we allowed Aberdeen to settle in and defend and, just sit off and not really have to really do all that much to take the win. So why is that? Why did we rush? Why were we so eager to, get moving? I think there's an element of inexperience. I think there's an element of naivety from a lot of our new players. I think don't get me wrong, they've all shown flashes of what they can do in a Hearts jersey since the start of the season. However, I think perhaps there's an eagerness to impress every time they get on the pitch because they feel they have to do something, and maybe that translates to rushing things, taking, just trying to do things too quickly rather than taking time and actually thinking about it and making the right decision. We had a chance. Magnussen had a header that was straight at Mitov. So again, it's things like that. You need to be composed, take your time, and put the ball away. Put the ball away. There was Kabori had one. As I say, Braga had a couple. Milne had the crossbar. If we just take our time, we probably score one of those, and we're coming away with at least a point. Like I said earlier, I've seen us play worse than that against Aberdeen. I've seen us play worse than that this season and win, which is one of those things. The reaction after full time, Aberdeen reacting like they've won the Scottish Cup all over again, a victory that lifts them to the dizzy heights of 8th place. And a victory for them that keeps us top of the table for the time being, obviously due to the gap that we have, but it has been cut due to, as I said, Celtic and Rangers picking up some points at the weekend when we failed to do so. It's annoying. There's no two words about it. It's annoying. You want to win these games. You want to go to Pittodrie, especially against Aberdeen. You want to go there and you want to win, but it's a ground we always struggle at. And I know people are going to be in the comments saying, "Oh, that's not an excuse for losing, etc." It's not. We have put a lot of runs together this season so far that have been impressive. We've taken points off of Celtic, we've taken points off of Rangers, we've broken a lot of hoodoos this season, and so far, and perhaps going to Pittodrie and getting a win just wasn't on the cards yet. But you know what? We fight again, we go again, and the reaction has to be strong. We've just had an international break. The players have come back. It's been a little bit disappointing to lose against Aberdeen. Nobody likes that, but that's life. You're not going to win every week, despite the fact that we've managed to be the longest unbeaten side in British football. I believe the only team still unbeaten in British football, which is a mental stat to think about at this stage. So for us to get to the end of November almost and have suffered our first defeat, it's quite something. And, before I sort of move on to talk about our next fixture, I do think a little bit of credit has to go to Aberdeen. I think they set up in a way that works for them, and they have had a pretty average start to the season, a pretty poor start by all accounts. But Jimmy Tillene over the last few weeks appears to have found a formula that works. So fair play to him for that. He's certainly he's found a formula that works for his side and is getting them results. So I can't really say much more than that. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a lighting situation here at the moment. For those that listen to this, it's irrelevant, but I'm just saving myself from looking like a Simpsons character at the moment. Bear with me. It's these early sunsets. They're throwing me off. Where was I? Yes, Jimmy Tillene, Aberdeen. They've improved a lot in recent times, and you have to give them credit. He's realised that it wasn't working. He's changed their shape. He's made them a bit more defensively solid. And they play on the counter, they play on the break, and they did well to take the one real clear-cut chance that they had and score it against us. I know, football's not all about stats. It's not decided by stats, but you look at all the statistics for the game, we dominated every single aspect. We just couldn't put the ball away. On another day, we score one, we score two, we maybe score three, who knows? But it wasn't our day. The gap is down to 4 points. Celtic, as I say, with a game in hand. We, up next, take on Motherwell, who, at time of recording, are playing against Hibs this evening. So I'm sure Derek McInnes will be taking that game in with great interest due to the fact we play both Motherwell and Hibs in the not-too-distant future. December is a big month for us. Obviously, we're almost at the end of November now. The time is just flying by. December's a big month. We play Celtic at Parkhead. We've got Rangers, of course, as well. And we've got the small matter of an Edinburgh derby before the end of the year. So there is big games to come. And I think that kind of adds to the frustration of losing against Aberdeen and dropping all 3 points, not even just taking a point. Because I think prior to kick-off, I maybe would have taken a point if you'd offered me it, such as our record at Pittodrie. But we just never really looked like getting it, unfortunately. But now the focus switches to Motherwell, away from home at Fir Park. next Saturday, the 29th of November, which also coincidentally happens to be my birthday. So, as I say, long-term listeners of this podcast and followers of mine on social medias will know my thoughts and feelings towards a certain section of Motherwell fans. So for this game to fall on my birthday, there's some sort of poetic justice there. Hopefully we can go to Fir Park and kickstart yet another run that sees us remain at the top of the table. No pressure, lads, but do it for me. In all seriousness, Motherwell will be a very tricky tie. They're a decent side. They've been a little bit inconsistent this season, I would suggest. They currently sit sixth in the Premier League again at time of recording. In the Scottish Premiership, they currently sit sixth in the table. That may well change by the time you're watching this, due to obviously them playing this evening, as I say. So it'll be very, very interesting to see. I think Motherwell, like I've said, Motherwell are a decent team. They're no mugs, put it that way. They've got some very talented players in there. Mashwanise, their striker, is a player that I like. He's powerful, physical, quite strong, pacey. So will certainly be a handful for us to have to deal with. Hopefully, some of our fitness concerns will have subsided by the time that game comes around. You would imagine Shankland will return if he's available to. Craig Halkett will have served his suspension, so he will be once again available. I believe Benny is still out at the moment, and Ajew still has not featured, is still returning from hamstring concerns. So there will be some selection changes that or some selection questions that Derek McInnes will have based off of the game against Aberdeen. I mean, it's a gimme to suggest if Shankland is fit, Kabore returns to the bench. I think question marks should be put on players like Braga. As much as I love Claudio Braga and as much of a handful as he is, he's hot and cold at times, and I think against Aberdeen he was very much cold. Does he need to sit out against Motherwell, or do we not need to change too much? I think the best change and the biggest change has to be a back four. I'm not really a fan of the three with the personnel that we currently have. I think a four just makes more sense to have Christian Borchgrevink playing at right back. Obviously, he came off the bench against Aberdeen and looked reasonable. Nice to see him fit and playing again. Hopefully, he can feature and start at right back, and that could perhaps free up Oisin McKenty to be moved into midfield to sit next to Devlin and just try and provide a bit more stability in there. Because I think, as much as I like Thomas Bent Magnusson, I still feel like he's in that rough diamond category of a new player. I don't think we've seen him really shine yet. And he needs time and he needs to be drip fed in. The likes of Kurjota, it's the similar situations. These guys need to be drip fed into the football, but also they need to be relied upon when they're brought on. I think guys like James Wilson, Kabangu perhaps a little bit. I know James Wilson came on against Aberdeen, but guys like Kabangu sitting on the bench against Aberdeen, I'm sure he would felt a little bit hard done by to not get on. But hopefully, again, against Motherwell, there's opportunities there for him to come on and play. I don't personally think we need to change too much. I think Aberdeen, we could clock it up as a bad day at the office and just move on. I think that's the best way to do it. As disappointing as it is, it's frustrating, even more so because 24 hours prior we had Celtic scoring a last-minute winner against St Mirren, and Rangers obviously limping over the line and getting a result against bottom of the table Livingston. So the weaknesses are still there for them, and we have ours as well. If you'd asked me at the start of the season, or if you told me at the start of the season that our first loss would come at the end of November, I would have laughed at you. The sheer number of new arrivals, the new manager coming in the summer. Yes, there's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of hype about it, and a lot of, with the Jamestown analytics and all that buzz that was around it. That was brilliant, but there was still that unknown of what's going to happen. Are we going to be good or are we going to be rubbish? Like, where are we going? So for you to tell me that the first loss would come towards the end of November, I would have probably bitten your hand off for that, and to be sitting top of the table with 30 points, it's not half bad. The reaction to the loss against Aberdeen, I think internally Derek McInnes is talking about it and just sort of saying, it's frustrating, it's disappointing, but we just have to start again. We have to, go up against Motherwell and show what we can do. And a lot of the reaction has come from the media. A lot of that I've lost count of the number of memes I've seen and gifs of, bubbles popping and all the rest of it and wheels falling off, etc. And you know what? Opposition fans can have their fun. I'm sure there'll be some watching this right now that they can have their fun about the wheels falling off and the bubble bursting, etc. We've said it for weeks and weeks and weeks that we are enjoying the ride of being top of the table without any real expectation that we're going to be lifting the title at the end of the season, as much as I try not to get carried away. It's very difficult to do so. It has been very difficult to do so. But the result against Aberdeen is a bit of a reality check, a bit of kind of bringing us back down to earth again. And it's now about how we respond. And that is what's massive. You know, we go away to Fir Park. There's going to be a near 5,000 travelling fan base, which is just ridiculous. But the players deserve it. And, you know, like I said, Motherwell will not be an easy opposition. They're a decent side. They play good football under their new management. They look a decent, well organised team. So we're going to have to be very much switched on. And I do think the return of Shanklin, providing he's fit and healthy and able to play, will be a massive, massive boost for us and hopefully should help us get over the line in that game. And who knows, hopefully kickstart another run of wins because, like I said, December is a very, very difficult month and it could be season defining. I don't say that lightly. I certainly think it could be a season defining game again. Well, not against Motherwell, but I think December could be a very, very important month in terms of at the end of it, we'll know where we are and we'll see where we could be heading into the January window and beyond. But, you know, my final thoughts on Aberdeen is disappointing. You know, it is disappointing, but Pittodrie is never a happy hunting ground for us. We move on. We have to move on. And a bit of perspective and a bit of context is required. We're still top of the table, albeit 4 points and Celtic with a game in hand, etc., etc. You know, it's still very much in our hands. It's still very much under our control. And that is, I hope, the message that Derek McInnes is putting to the players and just giving them that, you know, boost to say, look, where we are, we deserve to be there. You know, it's not been luck, it's not been flukes. You know, we deserve to be top of the table, and we still are at the moment. You know, I refuse to say the bubble is bursting, the wheels have fallen off until we start falling down the table, similar to what Aberdeen did last season. But, you know, time will tell on that. Sorry, pardon me. I'm nursing a bit of a sore throat, which doesn't help when you're doing a solo episode and you have to do all the talking as well, so please bear with me. But you can let me know your thoughts down below in the description. What were your thoughts on Aberdeen? How did you feel prior to the game? Did you expect us to lose? Did you expect a point? Or what did you think? And just let me know your thoughts for Motherwell. I'm going to give you a score prediction. I'm going to say we are going to go through to Motherwell and we're going to win by 2-1. It might be because it's my birthday on that day. I might be buzzing about it. I'm just hoping we're going to go there and win for personal reasons, really, more than anything else. But as I say, it'll be an opportunity for us to kickstart the season once again. And just maybe there's a little bit of a pressure off moment now. You know, we've lost a game. We're no longer unbeaten. Pressure's off our shoulders a little bit. So let's go to Motherwell and start all over again because I think that's what we need. If you are heading to Fir Park, if you're going to be part of the near 5,000 strong away support, give it everything. The players deserve it. Show your support. And the away fan base, the away travelling support that we have is sensational. Everybody says it and everybody, you know, it's obvious. The travelling support that we have is incredible. And the players appreciate it, the management appreciate it, and we need it because some of the reactions to the Aberdeen game that I've seen from some Hearts fans as well, it's like it's the end of the world and the decline is inevitable now, etc., etc. It doesn't have to be like that. The narrative is still in our own hands. You know, we are still top of the table. We're not, you know, I struggle to sort of say this, but and I know it's night and day and it's like an entirely different team with an entirely different management structure, etc., etc. Look at where we were this time last year. Look at where we are now. You know, it shows you how quickly things can change. And with the whole Tony Bloom, the Jamestown analytics, the investments, etc., I think the context for me, and this is the last point I'll make before I call it a day for today. The context for me is we are not even at basement level of where we could go. We're at foundations level right now. There will be highs, there will be lows. The result against Aberdeen at Pittodrie on Sunday was a low, but you know what? Look at the highs we've had already this season, and there's still going to be plenty more of those to come. There will be some lows, but it's important that we navigate those in the best possible way and just stay focused on the next one. You put the result against Aberdeen in the rearview mirror and move on to the next one, because Motherwell is massive. It is a massive fixture, and hopefully the players turn up and give us a show, because the fan base deserves it. And yeah, as I said, if you are going, make extra noise, give it everything, because it could be what the players need. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, folks. Like I've said throughout this week's show, I do apologise for the shorter episode this week, just with my throat and the fact it's just a solo show. It's a wee bit of a change in format. If you want to talk about any of the points I've raised this week, please do feel free to get down in the comments section on YouTube, or just reach out to me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, any of the socials. Let me know your thoughts. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Normal service should resume, be it either John or Ewan or myself, or all three, who knows. But we'll hopefully get back together in the not too distant future to start talking about some more wins, because I've forgotten what it feels like to talk about a defeat. So I didn't enjoy this week's episode, and it's not just because I was on my own. I didn't enjoy talking about a defeat. It's never nice. Let's get back to winning games, and we'll take it from there. Anyway, you have a good one, folks. Take care. Bye for now.